curiosity is such an important tool. So if I want to learn about your family because I want to talk gossip about them and talk about it in the like use it as entertainment, that is off the table. Like we do not use people's lives as entertainment. But if I'm curious about your religious traditions and your family, like genuinely curious because I want you to feel so good in my classroom, that is a totally different vibe, isn't it?
Well, hello, everybody. My name is Chris Rappold, and I am here with the Growth Blueprint podcast, and I am with my darling friend, Miss Tabitha Talib. Miss Tabitha, how are you doing today?
I'm so good, Chris. This is going to be a great podcast. I can feel it.
I have to believe it's going to be a great podcast because we spent about 10 minutes just talking to our guest, and it's like we're all long lost friends. So I'm really, really excited about this one. So for our audience, I get to introduce my dear friend who I've known most of her life, Dr. Liza Talusan. And I'm going to just read a little bio on her just so you can understand the perspective she's coming from as we go through our questions today. I think this is going to be a great one. So Dr. Liza Talusan is an educator, facilitator, and strategic change partner whose work spans K through 12 schools, higher education, corporations, leadership teams, individual professionals. She specializes in equity, identity consciousness practice, and organizational transformation. Now, I could just stop right there, and that's a lot. But in her role as faculty at University of Massachusetts, Boston, Dr. Talusan teaches graduate-level courses on leadership, equity, and anti-racism. She's the author of the award-winning book, The Identity Conscious Educator, Building Habits and Skills for a More Inclusive School, that offers a practical framework for developing identity consciousness teaching and learning across major identity categories: race, class, gender, sexual orientation, disability. Her consulting and facilitation work includes keynote addresses and interactive workshops such as building an identity conscious practice and engaging in difficult conversations, aimed at helping leaders and teams embed inclusive practices into culture and decision making. Dr. Talusan combines lived experiences, rigorous scholarship, and on-the-ground facilitation to guide educators and leaders in moving from awareness to action. She emphasizes reflection, skill building, and strategic implementation, helping organizations shift from merely acknowledging difference to actively honoring and leveraging identity in service of inclusion and change. Boy, wow, wow, wow. Welcome, Dr. Liza Talusan. Yeah,
Thank you. I feel like we should just skip the bio and be like, she's the coolest. Like,
she's the
I
coolest.
she's
mean,
awesome and welcome.
Oh,
That's
that
all.
would give
yeah,
us some extra time. Yes.
It would.
And be
Yeah, it would
all
buy you some
true.
time.
it would. And yes, and I think we're probably going to fall short of getting people to understand just how amazing you are, but we're going to give our
Mm,
best shot at it. So, Miss Tabitha, you
thanks.
want to kick us off?
Yeah, I mean, let's dive right in because the work you're doing is has always been important, but in this moment in time feels like just critical to like a whole new level. And I haven't read the book yet. It's on its way to me, but I haven't read it yet. So help us understand this term, identity conscious
Yeah.
education. I love that. Tell us what that is and why it's critical for our classrooms and our organization.
Yeah, totally. Thanks for that question. And identity conscious is a term that I think has emerged over the past couple of years, certainly through a lot of the frameworks that I talk about. And so, identity conscious practice, like, let's actually just break it down. So, identity can be some of the things that Chris mentioned: race, class, gender, sexual orientation, disability. But identity can also be like political beliefs. Identity can be religion and faith tradition. Identity can be body size and shape and physical ability and values that you have. So identity is just this massive, massive category of all the things that make us us. So that's the identity part. Consciousness is just being aware. Like, am I aware of the world around me? Am I aware that people have different experiences than I do? Am I aware that people might see the world in different ways based on some of their past experiences and what they care about? And then this practice is just this daily habit of seeing the humanity in people. Like at its core, identity conscious, anything, fill in the blank, education, practice, leadership. To me, Tabitha and Chris, is about honoring humanity. It's about seeing a whole person for who they are, and for about understanding how we interact with each other and relate to each other. And it's so timely today because I feel like we have forgotten how to treat each other as compassionate human beings during a time where like there's a lot of political divisiveness. You're either a Republican or a Democrat, or you're either rich or you're poor, or you're either Christian or Jewish. Like we've just become so binary. And the truth is, you could be all of those things in the same family, in the same human. And so, an identity conscious practice in education is understanding that we are made up of so many different qualities. We should be aware of what those are so we can honor the humanity in each person. And that shows up in our leadership, in our teaching, in our learning, and we are just creating more curious and compassionate spaces. That's it in a nutshell. Like yeah. It's like be a good person. That's what
I
it
mean,
is.
I love that you did that. I mean, when I can imagine when people listening to this heard that term, like all sorts of feels happened in their body,
Totally.
right? You've got identity in there and consciousness, and now you're trying to put in that, like, and imagine there's feels there, whatever your feels are. So I love
Totally.
that you were just like, look, it's all the things that make us us. It's
Yep.
awareness. It's humanity. Done. And I know it's so much more
Yep.
complicated than that, but the essence, just to boil it down to humans seeing each other as humans, I love that. I love that.
Yes.
That's beautiful.
Isn't that so simple?
Yeah, let's just
It's
do
really
it. End the
not
podcast.
complicated.
Come on.
Not complicated.
I'm going to jump in with a question off of Tabitha's
Yeah.
question. So could I ask, and it's just a curiosity question,
Yeah.
why is it that people do the opposite?
I know.
For is it for convenience? Is it to be able to make sense out of their world? What's the genesis of creating division instead of this
Yeah.
approach?
So it's both and. I mean, certainly stereotypes are designed to give us shortcuts, right? So if I'm trying to understand my world around me, stereotypes and like preconceived notions help me to make quick decisions. The problem is we have become a world where we have forgotten how to slow down. I mean, we're in the age of TikTok, right? Like 30-second videos. I love that you're doing like a longer podcast because a lot of podcasts are like 10 and 15 minutes because that's all people can tolerate. And so we often rely on stereotypes. Again, they can be very helpful um, when we're trying to make quick decisions. And so if your interest is just, I want to be quick about it, I want to judge quickly, then sure, divisiveness helps, stereotypes helps, being in your bubble is super helpful. But humanity is much more complicated than that. Like people are much more complicated. And so sure, there are definitely times where I want to like watch a 30-second TikTok video. And then there's other times where I do have to balance that with a book or a longer documentary in my life. And so doing the longer process, more difficult work takes time, it takes focus, and it takes attention. Three things which I feel like we have sort of dropped off of our radar because being quick and fast and judgmental is just easier than putting in the time to practice curiosity, collaboration, critical thinking. Like those take effort. And so at some point, we have to decide that people and humanity and each other are like worth that effort to slow down and
Mm,
just understand who people are. But we've
mm.
sort of lost it, right?
Oh, I would say we have.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, for sure. So when you're thinking about this, let's talk about educators for a second.
Yeah.
It almost seems that this is one of the first priorities, perhaps for educators. So for teachers who are new to this work, what's the
Yeah.
first step they can take to make their classroom more identity conscious
Hmm.
without
Yeah.
feeling overwhelmed?
Yeah, it's so, I mean, again, identity consciousness shouldn't feel heavy. It should be getting back to basics, which is really what it's about. So, back to basics, know your students. Like, well, it doesn't feel so hard. Like, know who they are, know what they're interested in, know their families, know what they enjoy, know what motivates them, know what drives them. I mean, we do this all the time in terms of like, is this student like, let's go early childhood. Does this student like coloring? Does this student like pretend play? Does this student like to draw and write stories or tell stories? And so we have to go back to that piece of what do people enjoy? Who are they? And it takes time to understand who they are and learn about them. Now, that's easier to do in like an elementary school classroom where you have maybe 18 to 22 students. But for some of my teachers who are like new teaching in college and they have a lecture hall of 250 students, I do not expect you to understand what everyone's favorite color is and what motivates them and what, like, it's not possible. But so where we can do that, where we can build relationships, where we can understand a little bit more about who people are and what motivates them and what drives them, like that is actually how we get started. And teachers are already doing that. So I think, Chris, like one of the things that people get nervous about is they're like, okay, Liza, so you said, how do people learn? What do they like? But I'm nervous about asking about their religious beliefs or their culture or their family structure. And so I would just remind them that curiosity is such an important tool. So if I like want to learn about your family because I want to talk gossip about them and talk about it in the like use it as entertainment, that is off the table. Like we do not use people's lives as entertainment. But if I'm curious about your religious traditions and your family, like genuinely curious because I want you to feel so good in my classroom, that is a totally different vibe, isn't it? It's coming from a place of real, genuine, like authentic connection. I care about you. I want to honor you. I want to create an environment that feels so welcoming and so good for you. So at its most basic, sometimes teachers will just like put posters on the wall, for example. So if you have a child whose parent navigates the world using a wheelchair, wouldn't it be nice if you had like a picture of a family that had a parent or adult or a caregiver in a wheelchair using a wheelchair? Like it's
Mhm.
like little stuff like that that you can start with. Books are always really helpful. And then just making sure that we say hello and good morning to everybody and goodbye and have a nice day and using people's names. Like that is also identity conscious work. So it does not have to be, I now need to get a doctorate in identity and like teach third grade. It's there's little things that we could do around putting up representation, making sure we're making eye contact, smiling, asking about people's families and their traditions. It's about coming back to basics, honestly.
Yes. At Personal Best, as you well know, we had a decision to make a long time ago, and perhaps it's part of my personality, but a lot of martial arts schools are very instructor centric. Like you walk in and there's a ginormous picture of the instructor, and then there's all of the trophies and all of that. And I'm not disparaging anybody, but we made a very conscious effort that we are student focused, or we're student centered.
Mhm.
So
That's right.
the pictures on the wall are going to be the students. They're not going to
That's
be,
right.
so I think it's very reinforcing, and it's quite easy in this basic concept for an educator, just to simply look at your classroom and say, does it represent, the people that you're teaching that should be the most important?
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, nothing makes me happier than when seeing I'm like student of the month. And my picture is up on the karate wall. Like I love it. But I also love, I only go to class like at a certain time. And so I don't know what's happening in other classes or who people are. And I love standing there a few minutes before class and just seeing what's happening in other levels and other classes. And there are pictures of the instructors in the back, like behind the
Yeah,
front
of course.
desk, which is
Yeah.
so awesome because I don't ever get to see them. So it feels so like to me, I think what you've created by putting the faces of the instructors is now it actually makes me feel like one school. It makes me
Mhm. Yes.
feel like one family. And so even though that's a great example of how this one physical representation, the pictures of all the other instructors at the other schools also helps me to make me feel more connected to them. So when I do see them, I'm
Mhm.
like, oh, I know you. Hey,
Yes.
you look familiar to me. Like, how are you?
Yes.
And then they're
Yes.
like, who the heck are you? But
Yeah.
it's just so lovely.
Yeah. We say we're one school with four classrooms.
Yes, yes. It's
Yeah.
lovely. It's lovely.
Yeah. Thank you.
I'm
Thank you.
super this might be an unfair question, but, you talked about, like, new teachers in the classroom, and one of the things that's, shows up for me a lot these days is sort of the intergenerational, tensions
Yeah.
and opportunities and challenges, and I'm curious because I know you're in a lot of spaces. Do you see generational differences in terms of challenges and opportunities for engaging this identity conscious environment?
That's a great question because I think there's a lot of assumptions that we can make about who's bought in and who isn't. But honestly, Tabitha, like when I say that I'm not teaching them a new skill, I'm asking them to return back to basics. Then for my more seasoned master teachers, they are actually really excited that I'm not making them learn like a new tool, like something, right? Because they're always like, another professional development where I got to learn something. I'm like, no, actually, I just want you to strip teaching down, come back to basics. Who's in your classroom? Right? Oops, sorry. Who's in your classroom? Who are these people? And they get really excited by that. And then when we get to talk about identity, there are definitely some of my master teachers who are like, this is so great. Like, actually, my students know exactly that I'm a grandparent and who my grandchildren are. And I spend the first 5 minutes in morning meeting telling them about this cute thing that my new infant did. And so that's bringing identity back into this space. I think that there's younger teachers who kind of grew up in a generation where diversity was just a part of what we do already. Whereas like in my generation, it was kind of input into into the curriculum. A lot of our younger teachers are already pretty used to it and used to having these conversations. So the generational divide I find is not with the content, it's actually with the conversations that happen within the school. So I find that some of our younger people already have the habits and skills of engaging in conversations about identity. They're super open to talking about things like mental health and gender identity and sexual orientation. They don't have hangups about pronouns and changes in names and all that kind of stuff. Whereas just some of my older teachers, and I would put myself in this generation as well, we learned grammar in a particular way. So a lot of my students use they, them pronouns. I had to like work at using that in a sentence grammatically correct, which it is. And then there was other things around just understanding how open people are to talking about issues. So in my generation, it was very much like personal life is personal, professional is professional. And we know that that's not true. We bring our personal life into the space, even if we don't talk about it. And so our younger generation is more connected to that experience where some of my master older teachers are just a little bit more hesitant about having the conversations. So it's less about connecting to the content and more about their ability to have these kind of open conversations with each other. That's where I'm noticing the divide. But I think once they realize it feels good, it feels so nice to be able to see the humanity in other people, they actually do start to bridge that gap, which is lovely to watch it happen in real time.
Hmm.
That I
Hmm.
mean, I what I love about this, which I think is so true, is just you're making this so accessible for people.
Yeah.
You're giving people permission to just like it's not put all the other stuff aside. It's really not
Right.
about that. It's about you, which I love. I also know from doing this work that is so much easier said than done because
I
we
mean,
bring our
really.
defensiveness, we bring our bias, conscious and unconscious. We just bring that to our environments and to our interactions with humans. So I'm curious, like how do you support
Yeah.
people to mitigate that? Because we're human and it pops up.
So that's great. We start with it, we're human and it pops up. So I start with that all the time, right? And so I usually stand in front of this audience. I have 30 years of experience. I have terminal degrees. I've been teaching this work forever. And I wrote a book where the beginning of every chapter is like 13 chapters of how I have done this wrong every single time. Right. And I don't do it. Even just as like yesterday, I didn't do something well. And so, one, I think we have to be able to model that we are human in this human world and we have to make mistakes. Like, there's no way. Master Rappold, you had taught one of my classes a couple months ago, and we were doing a form that I was really unfamiliar with. And you had said the most brilliant thing in class, which was, hey, everybody, if you get this all right, then I have nothing to teach. So I would like for you to mess up right now. If people could, yeah, if you could just like not do this well, that would be great because it would give me something to do. And I was like, well, then I guess I'll mess this up. So I love that, right? And I know that because you're so important, you were a guest in the class, people wanted to like impress you, myself included. And then I was like, right, but actually impressing Master Rappel would be asking for help. would be having him show me like the proper technique. Like that would actually be impressing Master Rappold. And so I think the same thing happens with teachers. We sometimes want to be so perfect and get it right. And we're used to that. We're used to being like the content experts on the stage. And then when I put you in this place where I say, hey, like, let's kind of mess this up a little bit. Let's actually not be perfect about it. I want you to be a little bit messy in class. So, like in this class with me, so that when you are working with families and you are working with students, we've already practiced how to do this well. So, I think about things, Master Rappold, like class versus tournament, right? Like, I actually do want to. I want to get hit in the face in sparring in class because it reminds me to keep my hands up. I don't want to get hit in the face in the tournament. And so I have to practice certain things in class and get and not do it well so that when it is time to perform, I know what to do. And
Mhm.
so one, I think giving teachers permission to say, please be messy here. Please mess this up while you're with me so that we can do it so wonderfully and responsibly later. So that is like one technique, Tabitha, that I tend to do is like, please, please, please make mistakes. It would be wonderful. And then the second thing is we have to, again, as we think about curiosity, we have to take the time to learn about how people came to the conclusions that they did. So, for example, like I work with a lot of Catholic schools. I'm Catholic, and I do a lot around gender identity and sexual orientation, which in some places is like a taboo topic in some religious communities. And so, what I love about being able to do that in Catholic schools as a Catholic is one, I get to say, I'm one of you. Like, I also grew up in this religious and faith tradition. Two, here's things that I know that align with my Catholic faith and what we're doing, which is love for all, humanity for all, understanding and patience for all. And three, yeah, this like kind of tension around what we believe the Bible tells us and who we see as people in front of us. So, like, let's actually mess with that tension a little bit. I'm not here to convince you of anything. I just want you to think critically so that you can come to your own conclusions. And I think that's the other thing that's helpful. I don't come in and tell people to change their minds. I can't do that. People have to come along on their own journey. And so that level of compassion is like super important. I'm not here to convince you to change your religion, your ideas, your ideologies, like, but I'm going to give you enough so you can think critically about it. And if you decide to change and shift, like that's a decision you've made. Yeah.
I'm you can't see, but like I'm a little like teary-eyed because I just think
Mm,
that approach is so beautiful and so honestly, I think it's the only way people sort of adjust and grow is with that sort
yeah.
of grace and space. A lot of times when I'm facilitating, people will be like, well, what do you do if someone says this thing? I'm like, oh my God, I
Yeah.
love that because now we can
I
dig
know.
into it. Now we can go there and really talk about it. So
Yes.
I love that approach. That feels really
Yeah.
good.
And I'll say one of so I get I mean, I get challenged all the time in workshops.
Mhm.
And again, I have to like I know we're on this podcast, but like I do credit a lot of my martial arts training to it. And so much of what I learned is like the best offense is defense. And so instead of like gearing up for the fight, what are the ways that I could be defensive and get myself to safety? And so one of the things whenever I'm challenged, and again, I'm challenged a lot publicly, I lead with curiosity. So I have
Mhm.
been in spaces where and again, I'll use gender identity as an example where teachers of a certain age in particular have said to me, like, Liza, what are we doing? We're just confusing these kids. And so believe me, I will fight like a mama bear on this one, right? And I will go, thank you so much for your comment. I'm curious if you could tell me what's behind your sentence. Right. And they'll say, well, it's okay. It's actually really confusing for me because then, oh, okay. So it's actually confusing for you. We're not actually talking about the young people. And so once I actually figure out like what is their angle, then we can work with that. But if I'm just making assumptions like, oh, you're a jerk, you're a bigot, we're not going to get anywhere. So I always leave with curiosity. I always make sure that I follow up with that person afterward to say, like, thank you so much for your courage to even put that out there. I would love to keep talking with you if you want to. And so this ability to continue to connect with each other for people who are just going to yell and scream at me, which I'll say, Chris and Tabitha also happens. There's nothing I could, they're not ready. And so there's really nothing I can do in that moment. I just say, thank you so much. I really appreciate your comment. If you'd like to chat with me later, I'd be more than happy to. But like, I'm not going to fight with you publicly. It's not really my vibe, you know?
I
Do
love
you need a
that.
bodyguard to come with you on your next?
You want to come?
You
Although
trained
I
her.
am well
Don't assume
trained.
she needs a bodyguard. What are you doing?
I am well trained,
Yeah,
sir.
I
Well,
was gonna
I'm just
say,
looking at the places
yeah.
that she goes, and I'm just
Oh
jealous.
I
my
That's the
God.
only reason.
Yeah,
know.
it's rough and I do, as a mom and as a, that's not easy. Again, easier said than done
It's
as
not.
a facilitator and as a human to be like, okay, we're not going to get anywhere
Yeah.
if I gear up here. So I got to step back. I got to
Yeah.
take a breath. I got to like, let's meet. Let's meet and see where we can talk
Yes.
more.
And I will
Love
say
that.
there are kind of two versions for me though. Like if something's happening in the grocery store in the parking lot, like we're gonna, I've been trained well. I
Yeah.
mean, professional setting, like, I do take a more professional approach, but yeah, I mean, that does not mean that I'm not fired up and ready to go. I just, right, I can like switch in that way. But these are things that are very personal. They're very challenging, especially when people kind of comment on my family and my friends and my loved one and me. Like, I don't get me wrong, everybody. I have fire in my belly. Like, I am red faced, angry, and whether it's martial arts or just doing this work, I know how to de-escalate in certain ways, but I'm still ready to go. Like I'm still fiery about it. Yeah.
I
Liza, can
have
you?
to
Oh, sorry.
go ahead,
I was
Tabitha. Go
just,
ahead.
I'm just curious if you can talk to us about that inner work a little bit, because I
No,
do
yeah.
think, for those of us who are like, this matters to me, I want to do this. Can you talk to us about that inner work?
Yes.
What is the stuff we got to do to be
Whew.
ready to tap into the curiosity?
And let me, if I can, you did such an amazing post
Hmm.
about the outcome of the election,
Yeah.
and particularly for your husband.
Yeah.
And I think it dovetails beautifully on what Tabitha is asking. So
Yeah.
maybe you can include that in.
So yes, again, so it was a little bit about two sides. So I'll talk about the personal work first. I
Okay.
believe in urgency and patience, right? When you want to see change in this world, there's a combination of urgency and patience. Urgency because come on already. It's 2025. Like, how are we still being so cruel to people? How are we still doing things that hurt one another when we have hundreds of years of examples of communities being hurt, people being hurt, oppression happening in our world? Like, have we not learned what this does to people? And so I feel a deep sense of urgency to protect people, the most vulnerable, my friends, my family, like you name it. There's an urgency. And I have seen when corporations and communities have rushed into doing something without any intentionality, without any thoughtfulness, without any community buy in. And those initiatives have all tanked. And it's been hurtful when those things have tanked. And so I do know that I am playing a long game kind of strategically while also making sure that the people who are in my life know that I love them and care for them and individually will fight for them while I am pushing for institutional political whatever change. So patience and urgency is how I move through that. There's things that I can do and then there's things that I have to fight for. So there was an election recently and my husband was running for public office. And I have to say, I mean, he's just, regardless of him being my spouse of almost 25, and been doing together for over 30 years, I mean, he is brilliant. He has 30 years in education. He's so smart. He's so caring. He's also the son of a pastor, a grandchild of a pastor, like very much rooted in religious faith and identity. And he's always he operates from seeing the good in people. We're very well. I'm a little bit more shady than he is, but he's always seen the good in people. Like he really loves seeing the good in people. He sees humanity. He sees that of God in others. Like that is how he lives his life. Politics is sort of not the place. I mean, it should be the place for that, right? Like I would love if politics was driven by seeing the humanity in others. It's just kind of not how it is. And so his opponent did win the election over him, who has just a less experience. There's all this other stuff we could talk about with resume things. But Jorge's just so lovely. He wished him the best. He said, "This is not the outcome I wanted, but I'm here to support you." And like, that is literally who he is. I, on the other hand, was like, okay, Jorge's got to be nice about this, but I'm about to say, I did not like this turnout. This was dumb. Like I got to say all the other things, but I do. It is really hard, especially with the political sphere. The dirty game wins, and right. Like I wish we had more people centered like Jorge in humanity and kindness and values. And if that was how our country was run, that'd be amazing. It's not how it is, but yeah. So the dirty game, unfortunately wins in the short term. Patience and urgency. I have patience that good overcomes.
Yeah. Yeah. It's such a tough post that you had to do. And I admired it because it was just it was class. It really, really was
Mm,
class. Yeah. So yeah, thank you. Thank
very
you to
kind.
you and to him. And you can know one of my sayings that has just, it's remained because it just continues to prove itself. Like I can know somebody for 20 years and not really know them.
Yeah.
Or I could see somebody for 10 minutes how they act in a crisis, and I'll
Yeah.
learn more about their character in that 10
Yep.
minutes than knowing them for 20 years.
Totally.
And
Yes.
the post and the way that you both conducted yourself, it just reinforced what I already knew in this case. But
Oh,
it was very, very well done. So,
thank you for that. I
yeah,
appreciate you
well,
saying that.
yeah, of course. And thank you for, you know, carrying yourself that way. So
Mm.
if I can ask, because we have people out here that are listening to this and they may be in a situation where the team, the department, the company, the nonprofit, whatever, maybe needs some work. So the question is, how can school leaders create professional learning communities that foster brave spaces for staff to
Yeah.
engage in honest dialogue about identity and equity? Because I do think this subject, particularly for some, does require at least 20 seconds of bravery.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I would say every moment of bravery in this. Absolutely. Thanks for that question. I get this question all the time, and having worked with over 400 schools, I've seen some do it really super terribly and some do it really, really well. So the ones that have done it very, very well have situated the work in their mission. So, like, what is the mission of your organization? It usually has something to do with people, unless you're like a totally not people oriented organization, but there's like something in your mission statement that usually aligns with a positive work environment, productive workforce, community, something like that in the mission. So one, people have to root it in their mission. Thankfully, schools already have this embedded in their mission: community, belonging, growth, right? Learning together, collaboration, like all of that is this peer learning community stuff. And then second, there has to be trust in the community. So it's always better to do this work before something terrible has happened. I mentioned that because I have been brought into schools where something terrible has happened, and they're
Mhm.
like, "Great, Liza's going to fix it in a 60-minute workshop." And
Right.
so, yeah, so that almost never goes well. People are mad, they're upset. So a step before that is there has to be some sort of restorative justice work before we can even do this very vulnerable work together. People have to trust each other before we can actually do that. The other thing is that the way that I wrote my book, The Identity Conscious Educator, is that I wanted it to be something that was sustainable. So it is true. Sometimes schools have me do a 60-minute workshop and then I never see them again. And to be honest, it feels like a performance, right? I'm coming in, I'm entertaining, I'm doing this stuff for 60 minutes and then they don't do anything. Like there's nothing I've learned how to do just by doing it for 60 minutes and never again. And so the sustainability, the longevity is really important. So the way that I wrote my book, for example, there's 13 chapters. You do like a chapter a month, a chapter every 2 weeks or something like that. And it's like really bite-sized conversations. It starts with me talking about how I failed. And then there's like some reflected activities, and then there's some dialogue questions. The third is I always believe that choice builds trust. And so if people feel like things are mandatory, they are not going to trust the process. And I know some things have to be mandatory, right? Like at the university, I take mandatory sexual harassment prevention training, right? There are things that should be mandatory, but we have to talk to be transparent about why things are mandatory. So anyone who has to come to see me as a punishment is like never good. And so, but if you're like ambivalent about seeing me, I can usually win you over pretty well and like talk about why this is good and you're going to want to spend time with me. But for folks who are willing or at least a little bit interested, and that comes from your leadership, that comes from your mission and value statement, that's actually like usually where this goes well. So it always fails terribly when we're doing it to be reactive. Something bad happened and now Liza's coming in. Two, when you only leave like 60 minutes for it. And three, when you make it mandatory without anybody understanding why this would matter. And so those are some of the mistakes I've seen. But if people are at least like willing to learn, like we're already on a good start. We can do well.
Mhm. There's so two things came to my mind. One is that they have the mission up on the wall, but they're not living it. And
Ugh.
two, is they're so they're so close to the toxicity, or they've been around it so long, they just take it, maybe they take it for granted that it's always gonna be this way, and,
Yeah.
I know you're coming in and you're gonna rah-rah us all up, but, ultimately, it's gonna go back to that. To
Yeah.
me, that's a tough nut to crack. What is your approach? And
Yes.
and maybe it's the patience and the urgency?
Amazing. Yeah. I love that. So thank you for talking about how there's organizations that have the mission on the wall and they don't live it. So before we can do identity conscious work, we have to do mission work first. Like there's a scaffold to this, right? Like before you can teach me, before I can do sparring, I have to learn how to throw a punch. Like in this, there's just scaffolding and everything. So yeah, if they're saying things to me like, ugh, we're so messy, we're so toxic. Liza, can you do identity conscious practice work with us? I'm like, no. There's other stuff you have to learn before we can do this thing that requires a bit of trust and courage and bravery. So one, it would be around mission work, like why aren't we living our mission? And maybe it's the mission has to change. Maybe the mission was created 100 years ago and it hasn't kept up with who we are today. And that's why people aren't living it. Or maybe you didn't hire the right people and you forgot that in the job interview, mission driven questions should have been a part of this, or mission driven initiative is why people would want to work there. So there's like a bigger cultural issue to fix before we can do identity work. We can talk about identity and the mission, right? We can talk about like, is this a place that's welcoming for all? And if not, why not? Like there is identity talk, but there's like so many other things we would need to fix before we did any kind of identity conscious practice. If like you're not even living your mission. Yeah.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you.
I love that, like, that honoring of, like, you need the structure and the foundation or, like, this isn't safe. Like, we're asking people
It's
to do
not
deep
safe.
human work here and get in touch with ourselves and each other, and that needs a container. I love that. I'm super curious. So I get through these dark days by working with young people because I feel
Yeah.
I feel like I don't know, I feel a lot of things about young people. So I'm curious, in your experience, what's the role of students in creating these
Amazing.
environments? Yeah.
Oh my gosh, amazing, amazing, amazing. So remember, we always tell young people like Whitney Houston did, like you are the future. But they don't know what the future is. Like they don't believe that. It's adults telling them that they are. And so what I'm really appreciating is that young people are engaging in activism in ways that we didn't. Like they have YouTube, they have TikTok, they have Snapchat. And for whatever we want to say about social media, which there are downfalls to it, it also has been a wonderful way for young people to connect. My son, who's 16, knows about things happening in the world because of social media, right? He's not sitting down watching the news at night. He's like, quick thing on the bus or like looking at his phone where he's somewhere and he's learning about typhoons in the Philippines. He's learning about what's happening in India. Like he has so much awareness that I just didn't have access to. Guys, I grew up on like the Encyclopedia Britannica, right? Like we had to dust that like every week because no one ever touched them. Like that's what I grew up with in terms of information. And so young people we have to remember young people know so much more than we do. Tabitha, one of my favorite quotes is find a mentor who's younger than you. And oh my gosh, find a mentor who's younger than you. There are so many incredible things that young people know and have taught me about myself and about the world. And so, yes, they are so important, but the role of adults is we have to make sure that we are removing the barriers that gets in their way of being activists and engaged, because sometimes we the adults put those barriers up for them. And so I want them to be curious. I want them to explore about what activism and the world means to them. And part of I see my job as a teacher, as a parent, is to remove as many barriers as possible so that they can be curious about the world around them. And so, yeah, I think young people are incredible as long as we like make sure that we are doing what we can to empower and engage them safely. It's not that I don't have safeguards, right, in terms of my son and what he sees and what he watches, but I am constantly in negotiation about how flexible that container is, right, to use a metaphor that you used. Because I want him to be active. I want him to be angry a little bit. I want him to see how he can change things in this world. Yeah,
Mhm.
I love that permission. I sometimes get brought in to do youth leadership or youth voice or
so
culture
good.
building stuff. And the first question I always ask is, are you sure? Because if we open up student voice, you have to
Yes.
listen to them.
Thank you. Like, thank you, thank you, thank
So
you,
if
thank you,
you don't
thank
want
you.
to, let's not open the
Yes.
worms.
Like, boom, thank you for that, right? Because students see that all the time when they're like, okay, so the adults asked us questions, but then they did nothing. Thank you for that. Yes. So to like, just to amplify your message, adults, if you want student voice involved, then you have to actually honor that process and not have it be performative because young people will call you out
Smell it.
fast about your performativeness. Yes.
Mhm.
Love
Love that.
that.
Can I ask about sustaining the work? Many schools start
Sure.
strong. I'm sure they do,
Yeah.
especially if they've had you come, but struggle to sustain long term equity and
Yeah.
inclusion efforts. What practices help embed the work into the culture or the container?
So what a great question. And honestly, this can be answered in any subject. What is sustainable weight loss? What is sustainable fitness? What is sustainable reading practices? What is sustainable cooking healthy, right? It's less about the identity conscious piece and just what is sustainability. You know, one of the quotes that I often use as an athlete and as a martial artist is it's not always about motivation, it's about commitment. Right there I was not motivated to run this morning and I'm committed to it because I know what it does to my body and to my health and to my energy levels and all those things, but like I am not always motivated. So for schools that believe that motivation is going to be the thing that carries them, I'm so sorry to say it's not going to be that. As a teacher, I'm not, don't tell my students, I'm not always motivated to go teach today, but I do because I care about it and it's a paycheck. Like there's all these other things, even when I'm not motivated. So for this identity conscious practice, it has to be beyond motivation. It has to be beyond, wouldn't this be cool if we did it? You have to come up with an actual strategy. Like, why are we doing this? Towards what outcomes are we trying to work towards? What kind of barriers are we going to face? What are the opportunities that result from us doing this? And so people have to be strategic. It's why I call myself a strategic partner because I want people to understand these strategies. Again, if like I'm just trying to lose weight to fit into a bathing suit for this one cruise, like I'm gonna binge eat the minute the cruise is over. So like what is that sustainable long-term motivation? And honestly, it's different for everybody. So there isn't like a set understanding of motivation commitment. That school, that person, that institution has to go through a process to understand what their commitment is when the motivation has tanked. And that's how you make the work sustainable. Otherwise, and we've seen this, otherwise it fails miserably.
Hmm. Can I ask a very boots on the ground practical question? In a school,
Yeah.
it sounds like you've come back again, once again to the mission, which
Hmm.
is just so important. A sustainable practice is at the staff meetings, for example, we open up by reading the mission,
Right.
or for an individual teacher, how do they stay connected to that? Is there something there?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, well, there's certain exercises that I do with people, especially if we're doing mission based work. So I'll have the mission, which is usually 2 or 3 sentences, right? Mission statements aren't long. And I usually ask people, like, I want you to read this. What words do you connect to? And I promise you, in a room of 20 people, there's 20 different words that people are connecting to. And then I ask them their why. So, why is the word community the thing that you're connecting to? Why is the word curiosity the thing that you're connecting to? Why is global the word that you're connecting to? So everyone's going to connect to something different. And then I
Right.
have them take that and say, like, well, so what would happen if that disappeared? Like if we removed that from the mission statement, how would that change your relationship to this organization, to the place? Right. And so then we start thinking about, well, if that value is missing, what
Yes.
actually happens? And then we start to create strategies. So if I'm committed, if I believe that global is the word that I'm most connected to, then what are the 3 action items that I can do to sustain the word global? So we always talk about build knowledge, like what are the facts? What is the information that I need to know? Engage in reflection is what does this have to do with me? So why is that word important to me? And then move to action. What is the evidence that I believe this is important? And so what is the evidence is we have to make sure that I am demonstrating it so that if I'm walking around, I can go, oh, Tabitha really likes global because she does these 7 things. Oh, Chris really likes the word community because I can see that Chris does these 7 things. Like there has to be evidence behind your values and your behaviors. And so, and if you notice it start to fade, you have to ask yourself why. So I have people do that at the beginning of the year, mid-year, end of year. End of year, I'd say, what was challenging about holding on to these values? Where did you notice it wane? Where did you notice it increase? But we can't just talk about mission and values in September. Like we have to have this be a consistent
Right.
conversation. Yeah.
Thank you so much. That's just brilliant. Uh, Liza, your answers are simple, but I think part of it,
Totally.
but that is the brilliance of them.
Yeah.
That truly is the brilliance of them. Thank you.
Thanks.
Simple, just
Yeah.
not easy.
Keep it simple.
Simple, just not easy.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
You-
Nothing about this work is easy, right? I mean, nothing about anything worth fighting for is easy.
Right.
But we can make it doable, right? We can make
Yes.
it
Love that.
doable.
Yes.
I love that.
All right, ma'am. Do you have the last question?
Ooh.
Oh, me? I get the last question?
I guess you will.
Ooh, okay. Let me look at the, all right. Let me, I mean, I think I want to
Mhm.
end with a call to action, right? Like, because you're right.
Yay.
I love that you've made this just approachable. Like, I think there's a lot of
Mhm.
fear that you've taken off just by saying, like, this is what the
Yeah.
essence of it.
Yeah.
Also, this is big, and when we're talking about educators, there's so much on their plates. So if you had a call to action, like just
Yeah.
one thing that you want people to do, remember, think about, what is that
Yeah.
one call to action?
Awesome. Yes, the world is overwhelming. Like lots of things are overwhelming, and so no, when one of the emotional responses when things are overwhelming is we tend to shut down. And so if you think about, I don't, whatever your political beliefs, like if there's just a lot coming at us in the world, and so it's overwhelming, I found myself shutting down too. Like I stopped watching the news, I stopped doing things like, and so we have to be able to take whatever's overwhelming and chunk it into smaller pieces. A great example, Master Chris, we were learning the Beethoven form. It has like 97 trillion thousand moves, no lie. And you never teach me that all at once. Right? We like learn a little bit at a time and then eventually we put it together. So why would that be any different in the world that we live in? Like we have to chunk, we have to do things small at a time so that when it comes together we see the whole picture. So the call to action, everybody, is when you are feeling overwhelmed, understand that your natural response is to shut down. Don't allow that to happen. Chunk, right? Start to chunk and put into smaller bite-sized pieces the work that you want to do so that when it is all strung together, you can see the incredible change that you've made. But the response to being overwhelmed is to take it bite by bite, piece by piece, and that kind of patience and urgency pays off in the end.
Mhm.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
Amazing. Just just amazing. And one of these podcasts that we could go for the next 10 hours. So fortunately, we're not able to. So, Dr. Liza, I want to thank you for sharing your time and your experience with us. It's people like you sharing your experience that allows the valuable nature of this work to spread. I know we see the value in bringing this to light. My hope and Tabitha's hope is that the more conversations like this we have, the more we take this from oh, that would be nice to have, but actually recognizing that for the organization or the team or the department to realize its potential, this has to be moved to a need to have. So thank you.
Thank you.
On behalf of myself, my partner Tabitha May Talib, thanks for listening. We invite people who have joined in. Please subscribe so you don't miss an episode, and please share the Growth Blueprint podcast with others. This will help us to continue to attract high-level thinkers like Dr. Liza on the topic of leadership and building culture. I promise you we'll continue to do our best to make sure each and every episode is packed with inspiration, strategies, and actionable steps so you can continue to improve your container. We look forward to our next conversation.